Welcome to the place where we learn about and learn from the leaders in our field who are powering human creativity. I am Aaron Dworkin, and this is Arts Engines. Thanks again for joining me here on Arts Engines. Today's guest is Angélica Negrón, who serves as composer in residence of the Dallas Symphony and is just one of our extraordinary leading composers in the field today. Angélica, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
So I am so excited to talk to you. You're obviously an extraordinary composer, written amazing works, and have this wonderful role with the Dallas Symphony, who is one of our great creative partners, helped us co-curate for this show. And I'm going to ask you about this really interesting symposium. But first, especially for just many of our audience in the show, I was just wondering if you could share. Obviously, we know about composers and creating all of the works, but I was just curious what your perspective is of kind of the role of a composer in today's society. Do you see any kind of specific role that you have, and also any particular aspects that you feel or view as a composer of color and a woman composer?
Well, yeah, I think any kind of creator has the potential to connect with others by sharing something that's deeply personal. So it is my hope that through creating work that comes from my own personal lived experience, that it also resonates with others that often don't see themselves in spaces in which I'm often in, like new music or classical music spaces. And I also think that there's a lot of potential for empathy and for creating connections with others that sometimes with language or with words is harder. And with music, there's just kind of a more immediate or visceral connections in some ways to make those connections and to understand others, to imagine the world as it could be, just spark curiosity and hopefully that's something that contributes to not only society but also to someone's lived experience and also to the way they relate to others and how they understand their place in their world. I think for me as someone that's Puerto Rican, I was born in Puerto Rico and grew up in the island, and now mostly find myself kind of navigating spaces that are mostly white and mostly male. And I never saw someone that looked like me when I was growing up. I didn't know composing was even a possibility until pretty late, just because I didn't see it. So I think visibility, representation, it's incredibly important. So it is my hope that young girls and in different places in the world can see me and other colleagues, and that's something that shakes something in them and makes them want to explore what being a creator could look like, what being a leader in any field would look like, what speaking up about what's important to you looks like, not necessarily only music. So that is my hope. It's a big question. I have many things to say, but I think that there's something, yeah, the most important things are there.
Absolutely. No, it's beautiful, and it is so powerful and so important, I think, in our society today. And this ability to speak and connect with people and express things that sometimes people aren't open to with just,
Right.
language. And so it can really be powerful. And I was also kind of curious, could you share kind of when you create, you often use these, wonderful, interesting mechanics. You compose for different instruments and accordion, robotic instruments, electronics. And just curious, kind of what brought you into that space to kind of give voice to these disparate aspects to create, ultimately a work that moves people and captures them.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Puerto Rico playing violin mostly and a little bit of piano, but also being really curious about the sounds around me, how the ice cream truck sounded when it was right by my house, how it sounded when it was getting further away, by the sounds of my mom and my grandmother cooking in the kitchen, and how sometimes there were pitches in them. So I think the hyper awareness of listening really drives a lot of the work I do, and I was educated in a conservatory and very traditional classical background, but even more important, I would say, part of my formation was this woman around, also the communities that I was in, the music that was playing those communities, and and for me, finding ways to bring those all to the same level and not be like, oh, I'm gonna just using the percussion pots and pans, and then that's gonna elevate them with an orchestra. I'm not thinking in those terms, and in fact, I actually don't like the word elevating. I think those all belong in the same space, and it is part of, I think, my my job in a way, or what I'm excited about, it's to put them in conversation. And what happens when the pots and pans, or the mechanical percussion, or the music box, or melodica, or some things that are not necessarily thought of as professional music makers, but are very important in a lot of our upbringing, and are always present in our sonic environment. What happens when we invite those in and put them in conversations with instruments that we're used to hearing and thinking of as music, right?
It is really just extraordinary and awesome, and as you clearly do, create this sound that reflects our sonic environment. And obviously connects with people so powerfully. So that kind of takes us to this amazing, right, Women in Classical Music Symposium. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Sure. So I'm thrilled to be in my second year of composer in residence at the Dallas Symphony Orchestra. My first year was a little bit particular, I would say, because it was right in the beginning of the pandemic. So I was doing my residency remotely and was able to go there actually for the other symposium of women in classical music. But this year is finally when I'm getting to be more with the orchestra and with the performers, and also be a part again of this wonderful classical music symposium that celebrates women in music, and that focuses on inspiring women in the field. That's going to be on November 6th and through the 9th in Dallas. And from my experience last year attending it and being a part of a panel, it's a really incredible just space to be around other women creators, and for others, because I saw a lot of students last time, for others to see people that look like them represented, but also go deeper into conversations of what happens then when we're invited to the table. And that's great, visibility, representation, amazing, but then what are the conditions that we need to thrive? What are the things that are still happening that are not quite right? And just the space to have those conversations is as important, if not more, to the other spaces in which we just see people like us on stage.
Awesome. And I think it's so important, right, to have that space and opportunity to do that. And so will the symposium kind of incorporate some panels, discussions, and then also performances by the orchestra? How kind of what will unfold for potential audiences? And will they be able to, for anyone who can't get to Dallas, although everyone should try to get there, are there ways that people can connect virtually as well to it?
Yeah, well, the symposium will include all the things that you mentioned. So a lot of panels. I'm being part of a panel that's called "Breaking Through Gender Identity Stereotypes and Biases," and there's also a lot of other wonderful panels, concerts, chamber concerts, concerts with the orchestra, also highlighting women conductors. And I'm curating a concert of chamber music, all by women composers too, that I'm excited about, which is always super hard because there's so many making incredible music. And then I believe most of the concerts and the panels as well will also be available to stream virtually, so people that can't go to Dallas can also access the information and the wonderful music.
Awesome. This is going to be truly extraordinary. I encourage everyone to check it out. Unfortunately, we are just about out of time, but I always like to ask my guests, there's got to be those tough days or days when you feel like the creativity isn't coming, or you hit those blocks, or potentially with collaborations, there's frustrations. And curious, how do you draw on inspiration, on strength during the toughest of times as a leader and such a leader in our field?
Well, for me, it's always important, and sometimes I forget this, to just go back to the basics. Step away from the computer, take a walk. The kids in the park, the people in the bodega, my mother who calls me, all of that, it's going to put me back in my place. I feel the most mundane routine tasks, and that also are the things that, at least for me, are feel like they're the most important, because they connect me to the people and the places that I love, that are part of my community. Those really center me. And when I'm not actively thinking of, I have the pressure to create something, or when I'm just living and existing as a human in the world and soaking it all in without thinking I'm going to make art with this, that's when I think, it's hard to remember, but it's when things flow the best for me.
Angélica Negrón, you truly are one of the arts engines who is powering human creativity in our world. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.